Hello everyone, welcome to our DuBois tutorial series where the theme is essentially learning Tableau by recreating the amazing works of W.E.B. DuBois. And so for today we're going to be looking at one of his visuals. It's called the age distribution of black people in Georgia compared with France. Actually, that is the title that I gave it. That I put in the one that I recreated in Tableau. If we go back to the original over here, we can see that it's actually called age distribution of Georgia Negroes compared with France. And we can see here age categories and then comparisons of the proportion of black people in both of these locations. So of course, for reasons why you can imagine, I'm choosing to transform or change the term Negroes to black people in my visits, and that's something you're going to see throughout. So it's just something to keep in mind, number one. Number two, just a quick word before we pop in to start building. Here we can see the comparisons being done with France, the country, and Georgia in the US. Now, I'm not saying that this is good. I'm not saying that this is bad. I'm saying that realistically, when you are going to be doing comparisons in the real world, more than likely it's going to be country for country, state to state, borough to borough, city to city, etc., etc. So just something to keep in mind for yourself as we go through this. And so, the final thing, I think this is a really good chart type to have under your tool belt, because you will find yourself, for those of us who are not yet in the professional world, or we don't get to do this, in a day-to-day, when we finally get to that point, you'll realize that you're going to find yourself doing these types of comparisons. And so if you can master how to build something like this, make it nice, informative, you already have a very good analysis tool to use in presenting information and analyzing for your clients, stakeholders, company, or whatever the case may be. And so for us, let's get into it. I'm going to open up a new sheet over here. And even though I already have the data set available inside my workbook, I'm going to bring in it again for those of us who are still getting comfortable with importing data. And so from this interface, we can go data and then click on new data source. And of course, you can see that there's a shortcut for you to do that. For those who prefer keyboard stuff, Control D. I'm going to click it. I also know that my data file is in the form of a CSV, and Tableau understands that to be a text file. So we click text file. If yours is an Excel file, you click Excel file. If it's in Google Sheets, put it in Google Sheets. Wherever you have it stored to, just click there. You can see Tableau has like a ton of connectors available for you. And so in my case, here's the data. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to click open. And right over here, we can see it's a simple, very basic data set. And so it has the category and the two locations, France and Georgia. Here we don't need to do any transformation. It's straightforward enough to work with. And so let's go back to our sheet over here. So now to start building, I'm going to raise this up a little bit. So these are all the data sets I have showing. Of course, there's a lot of them, so that's why it's like this. But you can actually go here and drag it up to cover them up. That way they're not too distracting and it's easier to work with your fields. Okay. So the first thing we want to do now is let's grab categories and put it onto the rows. And then we can see obviously the categories that we're going to be working with. Now let's grab measure names. We're going to put this onto the filter. So what we're doing now is we're going to select the fields that we're going to work with. We have this count of sheets and we have the two columns that came with our data. So a little word about this count of sheets. It's an auto-generated field from Tableau, and its sole purpose is its main purpose is to count the number of rows in our data set. And there are many instances where this is helpful. In our case today, we can ignore that. We don't need it. And so what we're going to do is uncheck it from here. So we're only left with the two that we need. And click OK. And then now we can grab measure names, which is going to allow us to leverage the data of those two things. We're going to drop it here. So now we can see the values that are there coming together. And as we know, we're going to be comparing the two locations. So in our case, it's France and Georgia. And we want to color the bars by those two different locations. And so we grab the measuring names and put it on color. That's one way we're going to do this. And we can see that it's created a stacked bar chart, which is another handy chart in Tableau. It's not what we want for today. To get ours how we want it, let's grab measure names again, put it beside category, and now it splits out the two bars into the two categories, which is what we like. We also don't want the name here, so let's right click, uncheck show header. That way we know what's behind the curtains, we just don't need to see it. And to clean up a little bit, let's do this as well. Let's right click here, hide field labels for rows, and we're not going to be showing the axes for this one, so let's right click, uncheck show header. Awesome. Now let's do one more thing. Under the view here, we're going to make the view full screen. That's just, I like to work in full screen where possible. Things are visible and spaced out. So we click here, entire view. And then final thing, let's sort these headers. So they are fairly sorted well, but let's take this ages under 10 and pop it to the top. Perfect. And then let's grab Georgia and just drag it upwards here. I wanted the longer bars to be on top of the shorter bars, and that's what I've done. So the next thing we want to do is we want to make it easier to separate between the different age categories, and to do that we're going to add a bit of space between the bars. And so to do that, I would like, let's come over onto this measure values under the pane, and we double click, and then we're just going to type AVG, open bracket, null, close bracket, enter. If you see what just happened here, it basically, we're adding a null value into the measure values, and so it creates a space here, right, in between each of these. It's just a little workaround to get those things spaced out. And we can see that it's introduced 8 nulls into the view. We did that, so there's nothing wrong with it. We just don't want to show the indicator. And so anytime you see a null in the screen, just right click it, and you can go hide indicator, and you're good to go. Now let's see here, let's make these bars a little bit bigger so they can touch. So let's click on size to do that, and let's go here, let's make it max. Okay, perfect. So now we have what we need. Let's color these according to the colors of the viz, which, if we remember correctly, black people was colored in black, and that's black people in Georgia were colored in black, and the black people in France were colored in yellow. So to edit these colors, let's click on color and edit color. And again, another way to do that is you can come here and edit color as well, whatever you're comfortable with. In Tableau, you will find there's more than one way to do things. Whatever works best for you is fantastic. So I'm going to click here, edit colors. For Georgia, I'm going to click here. And I'm just going to run through my palette and find a yellow. There is a DuBois palette available, which I'll put in the description. It has the exact color codes, so bear in mind I'm cheating here because black and yellow is fairly easy, but there are standard colors that, you know, DuBois palettes refers to, and I would recommend you look to those if you want to get as close as possible to the hues and, like, you know, all of that stuff. So France was yellow, not Georgia. Let's click here, double click, black. Okay. The null, I'm not going to color it because it doesn't show in the view, but I guess if we want to be safe, we can just double click it. I mean, sure, white. We click apply. Okay, and there we are. And then now, actually no, this yellow looks kind of funny, so let's use this opportunity to learn something Tableau. All right, let's go to the original, number 13, and I'm going to go to the sheet here. I'm going to edit the colors, and I'm going to actually double click here and copy the color code. So that's something you can do in Tableau. You can always copy color codes. Another fun way is to color pick, which is essentially just color edit, double click, pick string color, and you can pick a color on the screen. I'm not gonna do that. But again, for today, we're just copying over the hex codes. Why is this useful, you say? Well, sometimes you're gonna find some colors online, you're gonna find some colors in different places. One way to bring them into Tableau is you can copy the hex code. Of course, if you want to embed them into your whole the software itself, you can use the preferences document, but we're not doing preferences file, but we're not doing that today. Today we're essentially just using copying and pasting hex codes. It's a very easy way you can leverage to start with. So going back to it, let's go to sheet number 50. Let's go back and edit the colors and do the actual yellow that we need here. Okay, perfect. So now we have what we need. And let's clean up the view a little bit. Let's get rid of all these lines. To do that, we hit Format, we hit Borders to begin, and then we don't want any column dividers nor row dividers. So I'm going to hit Rows, Divider, None. By default, if you haven't changed anything to begin with, when you remove the lines from the pane, it automatically removes from the headers as well. We go to columns, we hit on pane, we hit on none, same thing happens. We still have some grid lines left over and an axis line over here. So let's click on the lines, this button over here, lines. And then for the columns, we turn off the grid lines. We don't want the zero lines. We don't want the axis. We don't want anything. So whatever you see, remove it. Zero lines, none. Axis ticks, none. So here we have just a very clean view. And one more thing to do, I'm going to change the font by clicking on label. And I'm going to right click and hit format. And then under fonts, we click. And one font that I found, which is close enough to the DuBois fonts, is the Courier New font, at least how my eyes see it. Again, I would think that, you know, for whoever is going to be doing this, you can basically search for whatever font you want to. But for myself, for this entire viz and anything to do with DuBois, I've always used the Courier New for those who are interested in what font that is. So do it. I'm gonna go all the way black because I find the Courier font is very light, and you know, even with the darkest black, it's still not overwhelming. But you'll notice with some other fonts, if you go like black, 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 sometimes it's like hard to read. So like we may, you know, you hear it a lot in the Tableau world, is like one shade lighter. Not even just Tableau, just design altogether, like one shade lighter. But I'm going full black. Something to keep in mind. And then next, let's show the labels. So if you remember correctly, our labels already came through as percentages, right? So we can see them over here. So we're going to work through these. The first thing we want to do is let's right click on measure values and format these by clicking on the pane, and then by clicking on the numbers, and then after we hit the numbers, custom decimal places, we're gonna go 0. And because these are already percentages, let's hit suffix, and we're just gonna add in the suffix manually. Normally when we do calculations or we have decimal places, we would click percentage and convert those to percentages, but we're just keeping these as whole numbers and adding in the symbol, so it's very easy. Now, we want these to be left aligned, so we're going to click on Label, Alignment, Left Alignment, and then finally I'm going to change the font to match Courier New by clicking on Label, Font, change from Tableau Book, click Type C, start typing, and it should populate for you. Okay, there we go. So you can see we're fairly close to where we need to be, and let me see here. The font, I'm just gonna hit Control, click measure values and put it on the label so that we're basically getting to edit those labels here. Click, I want to make this size 10 so it's a little bit bigger. Click apply. Okay. So now here we have it. Going back to the original, I'm going to leverage this view here. So I don't want to, import a background and do all of that stuff. The focus is just on the chart. So bear with me. This chart was made in Figma. That's a separate discussion, which again, if you have questions, you can reach out to me later on. But for today, I'm just going to right click here and duplicate my dashboard. And then I'm going to click here and delete everything from before. And we're going to bring it back in. Sheet number 50. I'm going to hit this arrow. I'm going to hit floating. And then I'm going to take this legend and make it floating as well by clicking on this arrow and hitting floating. Moving it out here. Click here. And we're going to remove this container because we don't need it. So X. And now we're back in business. So I'm going to click here again. Click this. And I'm going to hide the title by unchecking title. And then these are lined up vertically. We want them horizontally. So to do that, we can click here and we're going to go under arrange items and we're going to go single row. And then let me just move this out of the way. We can spread this out again here, here. But if you remember, well, hopefully you're moving with me, we're showing only Georgia and France. And so a little thing that I've done here, I believe in the original, what I did was expanded this up and now expanded this out enough to have Georgia and France like this. And then I grab a blank container, hit here, floating, and then I'm just going to use that to cover up this bad boy over here. So I want to be able to color this to match the background. So if I go layout, background, no. More colors, pick screen color. So this is the pick screen, which we talked about. I'm doing it for those who remember. Click here. Okay. And you can see that it matches now. Boom. So now we've done both coloring using hex codes and coloring using the color picker. All right, now let's move on. So let's keep this here, and I'm going to hide the title for this. So click here, uncheck title. Let's move this down a little bit. Move this down a little bit, and we want to remove this white background. So let's right click, format, under sheet. We click the paint bucket. We can see that here it's colored white. We want to click this, click none, and looks like we're very close to what we need. I'm going to format this legend by clicking here, this arrow, format legend, and I'm just going to change the body to career new as well to match the visual. So we click here, we click here. Okay, there we have it. And let's move this a little bit closer. Okay, and then let me spread this out a bit. Okay, so it looks like we're just about there. Let's quickly take a peek at the original. I'm going to click here and floating order, bring to front so that it brings the head of everything. So okay, we see the categories, we see the bars, we see the legend, we see the title. For the title, essentially what was done is basically just a text box. We would go here, dashboard, and we could pull the text box and we would type what we want to type, and then we click OK. We click here, floating. All right, that's all that is. But here we can delete it. So that's what it looks like, essentially. Size 15, bolded, same font. Okay, so there we have it. This is very simple. I hope that this has been useful and helpful for you. What happened here? Hide original. Okay, so something happened with this button. Ignore that. It's not relevant for discussion today. But there you have a grouped bar chart with a bit of space between it. Very useful for comparing two variables. And I hope that with this, you find yourself a very useful chart that you can use to analyze and present information in Tableau. I hope that's been helpful, and I'll see you in the next video. And until then, happy visiting.